Good evening and welcome to tonight's Voices program, Our Seat at the Table. I'm Stephanie Van Oortstrand, and on behalf of Voices, we are very glad you could join us. While we have been involved in candidates forums lately, it's nice to get back to hosting a dialogue about issues that are important to us both individually and as a community. Voices believes that factual knowledge presented by experts in their fields is very vital to making informed decisions. We are so pleased this evening to have Alan Dale and Melissa Nomakhosi Ndlovu join us. Alan is a farmer and agricultural advocate, and Nomakhosi is a nutritionist and local foods intern with Hungry World Farms. Alan has served in numerous leadership roles at the local, state, and national levels, including as president of the Illinois Farm Bureau, and has spoken as an advocate for agriculture in Springfield and Washington, D.C. Nomakhosi is a state-registered nutritionist in her native Zimbabwe. She holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Food Science and Nutrition. Before coming to Hungry World Farm, she worked in a hospital and 4 clinics where her work centered on young children and new and expectant mothers. Usually, I would be doing moderation duties, but for this particular program, we decided it would be much more interesting to have Alan and Nomakhosi present their thoughts and discuss what it means to have a seat at the table and what responsibilities that might bring us. As always, this program is being taped and will be available through the Voices from the Prairie Facebook site and our YouTube channel. So without any further delay, please help me in welcoming Nomakhosi and Alan.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Hi.
Like Stefan said, I'm a nutritionist from Zimbabwe. A Kashmiri proverb states that we have not inherited the world from our forefathers, but we have borrowed it from our children. This is wise, something we all expect from a proverb. But it completely shifts the outlook, everything. Where do we stand with land, with food? What are your responsibilities, and what are you doing with what you have been entrusted with? Do you consider yourself accountable for it? All these come to mind as I think of we are not only nourished by the soil, we are of the soil. This holds true, and which position do you put yourself in as you think of this? Don't worry, I'm not driven by land to remind you that you are dust. You'll die and you return to dust. This holds true for everybody. It's inevitable. It's a cycle. We are born, we grow, we die, and we decompose. But I want to take you before you degenerate and decompose to now. Your roles, your responsibilities now. Daphne Miller, a medical doctor, reminds us that the chemical makeup of soil has roughly the same carbon to nitrogen ratio, and it has the similar pH, which is 6.0 to 7.5 as the normal body. Like our own biosystem, it too depends on bacteria and fungi to supply it with carbon, nitrogen, and other elements it needs to make up its structure. Most importantly, carrots, radishes, strawberries, broccoli, and all other foods we like, we can all trace them back to the soil. We're dependent on the soil for the nutrient density of our foods. Ironically, we are steadily depleting the Earth's soil resources faster than the nutrients can be replenished. The speed at which human activity has developed is contrast with the natural slow pace of biological evolution. A Crucial Institute analysis of nutrient data in 1975 to 1997 found that average calcium levels in tall fresh fruits and vegetables dropped from 27%. Iron levels dropped to 37%, and vitamin A levels dropped to 21%, while vitamin levels dropped to 37%. That is fruits and vegetables within the period 1975 to 1997. Another publication of the British Food Journal of the British nutrient data from 1930 to 1980 found that in 20 vegetables, the average calcium content has declined by 19%, iron has declined by 22%, and potassium by 14%. Also, according to a 1992 Earth Summit report, when compared to 100 years ago, American soils are 85% depleted of the minerals and elements that we need to assimilate for our well-being. You may be wondering how we got here. It's our own practices, human activities. We have accelerating soil erosion, throwing the soil's nutrient cycle out of balance. One way is through modern intensive agricultural practices that have stripped increasing amount of nutrients from the soil in which the food we eat grows. We have cleared forests to gain space for planting our crops and for rearing our livestock. But the tree roots have gone, and there is nothing to hold the topsoil from being washed by the rain. This way we're losing arable land, and we're silting our water sources. By so doing, we're also killing aquatic life because fish do not thrive in muddy waters. By making our fields wide on flat ground, we're promoting wind erosion. The absence of hedges and trees allows the wind to take away the fertile topsoil. By the way, the topsoil is the most useful, the most valuable and fertile layer of the soil. Moreover, we are tilling in agriculture. The deeper the soil is plowed, the faster the nutrients in the soil are depleted. Because these changes happen slowly, often taking 2 to 3 generations to notice, we seem to be cognizant of the geological transformation that is taking place. The urge to deliver quality and efficiency has led us to a point of diminishing returns through monocultures. Scientists have focused on details, disregarding the infinite complexity of nature. The unilateral focused ways of doing things is not working, and it has driven us to a point where it's unsustainable. Monocultures yield genetically uniform crops that are very vulnerable to pests, to disease, to climate variability, while depleting nutrients in our soil. Because of those genetically weak crops, we turn to fertilizers, insecticides, and herbicides. And in the process, we hit a pesticide treadmill, where insects and weeds are resistant to these herbicides and insecticides. And by so doing, we prompt the need to develop more herbicides, more insecticides, and apply higher doses of this. Other efforts of breeding crop varieties of good yield, good size, growth rate, and pest resistance and climate adaptability may have been effective, but successive generation of fast-growing, pest-resistant produce is not good for your own health. Reinforcing sustainable practices through the implementation of permanent agriculture, known as permaculture, is a step towards restoring our agriculture. Encompassing earth care, people care, and fair share, permaculture builds on the biological diversity of ecosystems, which do not call for interventions, since organisms interact in the ecosystem to form a self-regulating, self-sufficient, self-renewal, and efficient and interdependent system that recycles nutrients because of her diversity. It is great that since 2002, California, Indiana, Kansas, Wisconsin, and other agricultural states have seen an increase in small to mid-sized farms that are ecologically and holistically managed. A good sign are sales of organic produce that represent the fast-growing sector within agriculture. Large agricultural schools such as University of Washington, University of California, Davis College of Agriculture have also come to a realization and have developed teaching and research programs in sustainable agriculture, focusing on key areas such as water, energy, soil conservation, and integrated pest management. We need to move to a place of healing for the land, a place of healing for humanity. By embracing agroecology, permaculture, restorative agriculture, and polycultures, we need to plant fast-growing trees among our crops. We need to plant trees along those edges as wind breaks to stop wind erosion of our soil. New kinds of machinery have to be developed, machinery that keeps soil disruption to a minimum. Oh, we have to shift to no-till. Since we're now aware of monocultures depleting our soil nutrients, planting many crops in the same ground helps balance the soil use. This is a key to healthier produce by restoring health to our soils. Now that we've talked about agriculture, what is your take? What is your responsibility? How do you manage the land in your backyard? Watersheds are areas of land that drain into open water sources. We have the Hennepin Canal. We have the Bureau Creek. All these, your backyards drain into these open water sources. How are you managing your backyard lawns? What are you applying to your backyard lawns? We know that excess nitrogen that we use to feed our lawns sometimes, it kills aquaculture. And we know that it increases the carbon in our water sources. What action are you taking to ensure that the world we have borrowed from our children is sustainable for them when we are gone?
Well done, Nomakhosi. I agree with a lot of the things that she said. Many of those points are near and dear to my heart. I want to make a couple of disclaimers first. Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm not here representing any farm organization. I'm not here representing any political persuasion. And some of those things that I allude to later on may surprise you a little bit when you hear some of them that I make. When I started to think about what I was going to speak on here, a seat at the table, I'm coming at it from a little different vantage point than what she was in terms of how we can impact the things that impact us and those who make regulations and legislation and policy. And so that's the angle that I'm going to try to approach mine. When we first started talking about this, and I say this affectionately to the two that asked me, it sounded like we were going to talk about where agriculture is and where it's going. And by the way, you have 15 minutes to do that. And I say that affectionately. It is so wide and so diverse that I don't think we can do it justice in 15 days. But I'm going to center on 4 things tonight. I'd like to talk about water and water rights, and a little bit about energy, and a little bit about immigration, and a little bit about trade and tariffs and trade policy. All the other subjects that we can read about on a daily basis, I've decided to stay away from that and look at the bigger picture. So that's where I'm going tonight. We live in a pretty good geography right here. We've got a huge aquifer beneath our feet. To the northeast, we've got, I'm told, the largest inland freshwater supply in the world. And we're very fortunate in those regards. There are a number of people who would try to limit our use of our waters, and we have to be on guard for that. I'm not an alarmist, But I think if you think back about 15 years ago, there was a plan to put a pipe to Lake Michigan and take it to Wyoming and Colorado and other places that probably had a dire need for it. And somehow we've got to figure out how to share that. WOTUS, Waters of the U.S. For those that have paid attention to that in the last several years, that became an overreach, in my estimation, by our Environmental Protection Agency. It got to the point of a puddle in your field, the ditch in front of your house, were all being lumped into the navigable waters of the United States. Finally, I think we've seen some sanity and some common sense approach to how we look at those things, and we do need to be careful of that. We've got to be judicious in how we use our water and recognize it as one of the real comparative advantages that we have, and particularly here in the Midwest. Second subject for a seat at the table, energy. We've got a huge variety of resources available to us right here. We have wind and solar and nuclear, and of course our biofuels. To the north there's some hydroelectric. We have geothermal, and we can tap all of them from our county right here. We've come a long ways in our usage and our efficiencies in most of those. And we never need to forget that they are renewable resources. I think many times when people try to enact regulation as it relates to energy or find fault with any of those that I just mentioned, I think they're all a small part of our total energy picture, not to be dismissed because they may only amount to 1 or 2% of the energy that we use. We need to continue to emphasize that they are renewable and the money stays here at home. I still think there's a place for fossil fuels in our energy plan. I'm not sure exactly what it is. It's going to have to be compatible with our environment. And we have to remember that those are finite resources. Immigration. What in the world does he want to talk about that for here in Bureau County? It seems like something that's pretty distant to the things that normally impact us here. But it's not. We've got to find a solution to what is called the guest worker program. There's an incredible shortage of labor in agriculture across the country. I'm sure any of those who have tilled the soil like I have probably had all of the $10 an hour labor they can handle. And it's a shortage around here. We're short in dairy and hogs and cattle and fruits and vegetables. There's a certain amount of hand weeding of fields that needs to be done, more inclined more so to the organic side than the other, but it's still a concern. And then somebody will stand up and say, well, if you just pay more, those jobs would get taken care of and they'd be filled. And it's simply not the way it works. Having said that, I am an employer. I've created a couple of jobs for my small business. I think I, as an employer, have a responsibility to pay a wage that is commensurate with the responsibilities of the job that it is securing. What did I just say there? The only people that can determine what fair wages are the employers who created the job in the first place. That is not a challenge to labor or anybody else who works. It is just recognizing the fact that until you've set in the shoes of an employer, it is hard to determine what a fair wage is. And my fourth subject. Now let's go back to immigration a minute. Let's stay there for a minute. I can see some that may say, he still doesn't know what he's talking about because he doesn't deal with any of those things he just talked about. I have a humus compost operation west of town, and for many years I received the landscape waste out of Kewanee. Prior to that, Princeton for a while. And it comes in the paper bags that you're familiar with that you set out at the curb. And there's always 1 or 2% of the people that use that as their refuse disposal. They'll put a foot in the bottom of the bag and fill it on up with leaves and sticks and whatever came out of the yard or the garden. The people in Kewanee who pick it up, they do a great job. It's not their responsibility to look into that bag, nor do they have the time to do that. And so they collect it on Mondays and put it in a couple compactor trucks and bring it to my site south of Manlius. And we dump it out, and it still looks like a pile of bags of leaves and grass. And we shape it up into a row that's 10 foot wide so I can take my compost turner through it to start the process of decomposition. And we'll be going through, and all of a sudden, boom, and here's paper and non-recyclables and shingles and plastic. And what are you going to do with it? Well, guess what? Every morning, the first thing we do there is we pick that out by hand. Because if I don't, 1 piece becomes 2, and 2 becomes 4, and 4 becomes 8. And you all know the lesson of what a penny does when it doubles every day. And it makes it just that much more difficult, and it impugns the quality of what I'm trying to produce. Still, what does this have to do with immigration? Nobody likes to pick that stuff out of the row. I've never asked a single employee to do anything that I do not do beside them, so I'm out there with them. But I'm getting too old for that. Some of those people lasted a day, and some 2 days, and some a week. Occasionally one will be there a month. Those are the kind of jobs that nobody wants to do. That's what extends itself to the harvest of fruits and vegetables and taking care of livestock. No amount of wage is going to solve that problem. Again, we need to find a way to make it so those people who wish to work for what I think is a commensurate wage, to allow them to have a place in our society. Without shining a light on any of you, how many of you would like to come out to my site the first thing in the morning, and it's 80 degrees, and the humidity is 90%, and each one of these rows that are 10 foot apart from me to Gracie is 150 degrees. There is no shade, so I think I can relate to the immigration problem from that standpoint. I don't think I'd get many takers in this room that want to come out and do that, and I don't want to do it any longer. What was my solution to it? I stopped taking landscape waste from Kewanee. That's not a reflection on Kewanee. That was just, we couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't keep employees. That's why we need to solve the immigration problem. Lastly, trade and tariffs. And without picking on Dean, who has walked in the back of the room, he's heard all this, so he's going to have to listen to it again. This is a subject that is near and dear to my heart. 28 years ago, I worked very hard for the passage of NAFTA. It was a good thing for Illinois. I'm going to come back to that. How many remember when one of our presidents put an embargo on our grains? Most of you. It took us 5 years to come out of that to where we were even considered any kind of a reliable supplier again. The same thing is happening right now with the tariffs that have been imposed on agriculture. This is taking it on the chin, folks. This is tough. I think this will take even longer to come out of this one. Maybe 10 years. I'm not sure that we'll get a resolution to what is meant to replace NAFTA in the next 3 to 5 years. It's just going to drag on and on. How can we get a seat at the table to impact that? Hopefully we already have people there that are doing it. But I'd like to relate a personal circumstance, an instance again, to show you how we accomplished that 28 years ago. My predecessors, the leadership of Illinois Farm Bureau, had laid the groundwork. We were very fortunate to have a gentleman who was the head of our governmental affairs named Leonard Gardner, one of the most respected people in Washington, D.C. as a lobbyist. And so that was the scenario that I came into this. And the setting is 1992, and we had 2 Illinois Democratic senators then. Senator Paul Simon was the senior, and Carol Mosley Braun was the junior senator. And she and I had gotten acquainted, and more than acquainted, to where I considered us friends and on a first name basis. And we were scheduled to meet out in Washington, D.C. to take the next steps as we were trying to get enough votes in the Senate so that President Clinton could get the passage of NAFTA. Again, we had looked at it in Illinois and looked at almost 200 businesses to see how it was impacted. And every single one, but one, was favorably impacted by the passage of that legislation. Who was that one? Believe it or not, it was 15 or 20 farmers down in southeastern Illinois who raised broom corn. And for those that might not know what it is, picture the plant, instead of having a tassel up there, having kind of a flowery extended mechanism there from which they made brooms, hence broom corn. And I spoke at a meeting down there of farmers, did not know they were in the audience, and they were pretty hot. They all came up after the meeting and let me know about it. But the reason they were hot was there was a tariff that protected them from broom corn coming in from Mexico. They had a pretty sweet deal, and I told them that. And I said, I'm working to end those tariffs. So, back to 1992, Carol Mosley Braun. We were scheduled to meet in Washington on a Wednesday, and prior to that, the week before, she was at her home in Chicago, and some of you may remember that her mother was gravely ill, very sick. And I didn't know if she would make it back out to Washington. I went ahead and took my flight. I was out there waiting in her office, and she showed up. And she said, Alan, it's good to see you again. And I said, well, let's talk about the important things first. How is your mother? And I said that with all sincerity. And she kind of stood back. There was kind of a calm that came over her face, I thought. And she says, well, thank you for caring, but she's not going to make it. In fact, I'm not sure she'll make it till I get home. And I said, you didn't need to come out here with that in the back of your mind. And she said, no, this is important. We need to get this done. So she and her staff and I went down a couple of hallways and opened up a door to a room about twice this size. And here sits the entire Illinois Democratic Congressional Delegation. I did not know we were going to appear before them. And we came in and there were some pleasantries and hugs, and the ranking member then said, well, we've got a few points that we'd sure like to discuss here that we're not too favorable. And she goes, whoa. She said, I've taken a really hard look at this. I've been advised by some really intelligent people. We're going to support this. She says, I've made my decision. Now it's time for all of you to get lined up behind us. Those things just don't happen. They come from doing your homework and hard work and presenting facts and not opinions. I used to say eliminating the emotion, but that's not the case. You control the emotion. And establish yourself as somebody that's credible. That's how you get that seat at the table. So to finish the story with her, we then went to her office and still needed Senator Simon's vote to get passage of this particular legislation. And as Senator Braun and I discussed it, she says, I still do not know how he's going to vote. And the president is counting on it. She said, so here's what I propose. I'm going to call him here in a couple of days and tell him that I am supporting this. But that since he is the senior officer, the senior senator, I will wait to disclose my position for a week to give you time to express yours. What a strategy. He was boxed. He had nowhere to go. I'm not taking credit for that. But I think that some of us, hundreds of us, had enough influence on her with the right kind of information and approach that she didn't have to go back and check her facts. If Len Gardner came or somebody like me came and said, this is the way it is, she took that and ran with it. So she did that, and I went back to Bloomington and was with my board there, and I got a call. And it was Senator Simon on the phone, and he says, Alan, I'm going to take some heat for this, but I've decided I'm going to support it. And that's how those things happened, because we had a seat at the table. I don't know that I've shared anything with you that's going to spur any discussion. We've come at this from two totally different ends, and I've really enjoyed that. But I assume we're going to open this up so we can have some questions, some discussion, and we'll see where it goes. Thank you. Who wants to be second?
Comments, thoughts on what has been presented? Questions to the presenters?
Here's one.
I didn't grow up on a farm, but I have farmers that are relatives of mine, and I've done a lot of reading on the topic, and what I see in this area that we don't see change in is tillage. There's so many farmers. I'm not picking on the farmers in the audience, but they're tilling every year. Spring and fall, there's a lot of tillage, either conventional till or minimum till, and you don't see a lot of no-till. But a lot of the newer planters have no-till coulters with them. And it seems like from farming's perspective, the son takes on what the dad does, and he kind of follows that same pattern. And I know there's a lot of benefit with no-till because you're not working that ground as much, and yes, the carbon values have gone down because of more tillage. But I remember for the longest time that most farmers didn't work bean fields anymore. Now, where I live at in Dalzell, we've got more farmers that are working bean fields in the fall in addition to corn ground. And it seems like no-till, if it's not beans, there's probably a good number of farmers that I don't even see doing no-till. And I actually know a farm family in South County, and they just got award last year for strip till and no-till, the Payne family. And they said they've seen the benefits of nutritional value in their soil improve over time, where they can actually cut back on nutrients that they're putting in the field, but they're farming better, but with less tillage, and it's helping the yields a lot better. But there's still so many farmers, farm families, that I don't see that change even happen. It doesn't seem to matter what the age group. I don't see that's the trend that we need to try to solve and work on it together, I think.
Would you like to start?
Yeah, that is something that happens. People are afraid of change, and it's a good thing that that family is doing it. That's what we need. We need one person to propagate change, like for each to start and go to the next person and the next person. So we are seeing results, and we know that it gives results, no-till, and it increases the nutrition density of the soil and our food. So those results are good because we're seeing the climate change that is happening with the tilling that we're doing. And hopefully more farmers are going to change. But it's a good thing that some people, a few people for now, are doing no-till. But we're hoping for more, because a few is not enough.
Couple of comments. You're preaching to the choir here. I've been a committed no-tiller since 1998 and evolved to strip till. There is such a thing as wise tillage, though. Every time you slice through a piece of soil, you give up carbon. You destroy some soil structure. And unbeknownst to a lot of people that haven't looked deep enough, every tillage pass creates a compaction layer of some kind. And that's part of what I do now for the company that I work with, as I work around the Midwest, is trying to impart some of that as to what can be considered wise tillage. It's a slow process. Bureau County, unbeknownst probably to most people in this room, led the United States in the adoption of no-till prior to me. I had tremendous people to learn from. Larry knows most of them from across this county. Several still alive. And about the time that it really started to take hold, there were a number of people that jumped in, and we had 3 cold springs in a row. And it went south from there. That was a real turning point when that happened. I think we're starting to get over that. Most of those people have forgotten that. Not all. But that happened, and that really changed things. I had 400 acres of no-till soybeans, and right up against me, my neighbor had, and I love him to death, I loved him to death, moldboard plowed. All the beans were this big. I mean, this big. When frost hit the 26th of May. He didn't lose a one, and I lost all of mine. And that happened to a lot of people when that trash held that cold temperature for a few hours more, and his warmed right up because the soil was black. So there's a lot of dynamics that affect that. I'm on your side, don't take it any other way. But there's a big picture there of why it's slow in the uptake. A little bit of a long answer, but yes.
Are there soil limitations for adopting no-till?
I think the question is, are there any soils that are not adaptable to no-till? A lot of the time, may I take this one first? A lot of the time when I make presentations and I talk about these things, I'll get the answer, yeah, but it won't work on my farm. And That may be the case, but I've got 83 different soil types that I farm or have farmed. And I haven't found one yet that I couldn't no-till. Now, maybe there's some out there, and I suspect there are. I have no doubt, but I haven't found one yet. What I have found, it's as much about attitude as it is about the soil. If you think it will work, it probably will. And if you don't think it will, it probably won't. And I think more people fail for that reason. Poor choice of words. More people move away from no-till for that reason than any other.
I agree with Ellen. It's a matter of attitude. Like, you have to work your soil. You have to include wood chips to your soil. You have to grow your topsoil for it to be good quality that you don't have to till it. It takes the work. You can't just say no till and not put in the work, because you won't see the results. You have to build the carbon, the nutrient density of your topsoil, but by including compost, humus, and you have to include wood chips and all these other things to grow your soil. You can't just practice no-till, because it won't work. You won't see the results. You have to work at it.
One part of the puzzle. Good question.
I have one. Actually, you've hit on a number of things that qualify, our seat at the table. And obviously we had a lot of discussions prior to this evening, as Alan alluded to, on what that meant. But I'm curious, when you say our seat, who is the our, and what is the seat at the table? I mean, who takes on that responsibility? Is it us individually? Is it us as groups? What is the best way to be effective at the table?
We are all responsible. We can only create a good wave of change if we hold ourselves accountable. It's good if you see a gap, to be the person who fills that gap, and not see a gap and say, my neighbor or the next person is going to fill that gap. Hold yourself accountable. Hold yourself responsible to do the right thing. You might be the only person who's doing that initiative of doing it right, but it's all we need. We need someone who's doing it right, and we need someone to take the stand and sit at the table. So I think we're all responsible for that seat at the table.
I gave the example of how I approached it from a legislative standpoint, so I won't repeat that. I agree with everything she has said. I thought that I might improve on my no-till by starting the production of humus. And I took quite a bit of static with that. I don't know that there's another one around close like what I do, but I figured that if they were talking about me at the coffee shop, they let somebody else off the hook. And that may sound cavalier, I don't mean it that way, but I think she's right. We all have to look inward a little bit and say, what can I do? And it may be a very simple thing. It may be in the halls in Washington, D.C. It may be lead by example.
Okay. So it's been going back and forth with with NAFTA, with the falling back of that, with the changes, this and that. It's hard to know where to move from here. We all talk about things, but it doesn't seem that we're getting heard very well. And I don't quite understand where to go from here. I mean, if we just, other than being aware and talking to congressional, representatives or senators or state people, who else who else should we be talking to and what else should we be doing?
Shall I start?
You can take that
I believe it's time that our commodity groups go on the offensive. And that is a place where they will accept your input gladly in this case. I think they need to take a very hard look at exactly what is being proposed to be enacted. It needs to be out in black and white so that everybody can judge that. I think they also need then to take that and contrast it to what we did in the original NAFTA. And if it is not at least as good or better, then we've wasted 28 years and hundreds and thousands of hours of volunteer time that put the other in place. Now, maybe something better is coming, but I think each one of those commodity groups, particularly those that are affected by it, need to take some action and put some things in black and white so that we can answer that question, and then you have a better point of reference from which to make a comment to a legislator or to a neighbor. What the heck is going on? Have we made progress?
Nomakhosi, can I word that just a little bit differently for you? Just because you're coming from a different environment, do you have, this sounds very naive and I apologize, do you have a lot of the same issues